hasn't this been a tremendous event
It,
so far?
it's been excellent. I could just sit here and listen to these folks all day, and Scott's talk on gaming was just fascinating to, really explore the theories behind games and how we can apply that to our work life. It's really fascinating.
Well, I'd like to take a quick minute to introduce you, Randy. Today's actually the first day we've met, but I've been aware of your work online for quite a long time. Randy's Leading with Trust blog site has won Top 100 Socially Shared Leadership Blog, Lifetime Achievement Award from Trust Across America, and Switch and Shift's Top 75 Human Business Champion Award. Wow, that's a lot. And Randy was named one of the 100 most important thought leaders on the topic of trust. And Randy, you also serve as the VP of Client Services for the Ken Blanchard Company. So that's a tremendous list of accomplishments. And I'm thrilled that we finally have the chance to talk. We're going to switch gears a little bit from this idea of gamification and talk a little bit about trust. Randy, your research into trust shows alignment with this research on motivation. Could we talk for a few minutes about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Trust is before motivation, it's after motivation, and it weaves all through. Some people get the chicken and egg dilemma. What comes first? Do you need an environment of trust in order to inspire motivation in your people, or do self-motivated people help foster the environment of trust? And I don't think it's an either-or equation. I think it's both and. And some interesting connections when you look at the three psychological needs that we've talked about today: autonomy, relatedness, and competence. You clearly see how trust weaves through each of those psychological needs. So, for example, with autonomy, when I speak with folks or work with clients, I frequently get into discussions about, well, we know what trust is. What's the opposite of trust? It must be like mistrust or distrust. And that's not really the case. The opposite of trust is control. When we tend not to trust people, we want to retain control because we want to remain in power. And that just squashes people's sense of autonomy. If you can imagine that in the workplace, leaders who are micromanagers or, obsessively trying to control the environment, it just ruins the sense of trust that people have to take risk, because risk is inherent in trust. Without risk, there's no need to trust. And so control and risk and trust and motivation, they all work together. And if leaders can find a way to appropriately relinquish control, empower their people, they can see trust flourish in the workplace. So an interesting connection there.
Definitely. Well, I think that whole idea of micromanaging and leaders maybe who aren't as trusting does cause a lot of dissatisfaction in the workplace. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it certainly does. When we look at low trust in the workplace, well, when you look at the surveys around trust levels in the organization for the last 20 years or so, we've seen historic lows. When you look at the surveys of, do people trust their senior leaders, it's just been a chronically low condition. And a large factor in that is the sense of relatedness that people do not have with their senior leaders. And when we look at trust in light of the psychological need of relatedness, there's sort of two layers we can look at that. There's a concept called distal trust, which is trust between, let's say, a frontline employee and the senior leaders. And there's proximal trust, the trust that you have in one-to-one relationships or with your direct manager. And when we hear those surveys about people have very low trust levels in their senior leaders, it's usually in that distal trust element. And the primary way to combat that, to improve that, is to improve your sense of connectedness with people, to establish that personal connection. And you can do that in a number of ways. Communication is an obvious one. Amping up the level of communication that senior leaders have with frontline people. Recognition and reward. telling people good job, just taking the time to simply acknowledge people is huge in terms of building trust within your culture and workplace. Um, I was just going to mention earlier, Dr. Zagarmi, Drea mentioned one of the 12 factors of employee passion was that relatedness to boss and relatedness to colleagues. Trust is a fundamental dynamic in those two relationships. And so if you can maximize that level of trust, you go a long way towards improving, your employee engagement and their sense of work passion.
Sure. Well, Randy, we noted a few minutes ago that you are in that executive level world, and being a part of the Ken Blanchard companies, I imagine you've observed senior leaders doing this relatedness and communication thing really well. Do you have an example either of something that you've observed in your work or something that you try to do as a leader that can help us understand how to create that relatedness that leads to trust?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things I enjoy the most about sort of my dual role in the organization, both as our trust practice leader, being a subject matter expert in trust, and also a business unit leader, is I've got to walk my talk. I have to, this is a living laboratory where I have to apply these concepts. And specifically to your question, I've found through my experience being authentic and transparent with people, not putting on airs, sort of getting my ego out of the way and just relating to people in a very sincere and authentic manner is a primary driver of improving that relatedness. A very specific example is periodically I'll try to write handwritten notes to employees. A couple years back, I did a handwritten note to all of my team members, and I included an ink pen along with the note, and I said, "You've got the right stuff," WRITE. And 2 years later, I had a team member say to me when we were having a conversation, she said, "You know what? I still have that note of encouragement that you sent me. I keep it on my desk every day. And whenever I'm having a rough day, I just look at the note and the positive words that you shared with me are just, really inspirational." And that's not like I'm some, genius for doing that. It's a common sense way to just build personal connections with people. And that's where trust starts, is in those personal connections.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much, Randy. And thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day to share with us. For those of you who are just meeting Randy for the first time, you can learn more about him by going to his blog at leadingwithtrust.com. You can also check out more of the Blanchard Company's thought leadership around trust in the book Trust Works by Ken Blanchard, Cynthia Olmstead, and Martha Lawrence. You can follow Randy on Twitter or visit his website, leadingwithtrust.com. I think we said that already twice. We're going to make sure you get there. Get to leadingwithtrust.com.
Repetition.
Absolutely. So thank you so much. And
My
I'm
pleasure.
thrilled to move us to our next segment as we say goodbye to Randy.